when I hear people expressing frustration, it's not coming from a place of curiosity. And that is what tells me the amygdala is in play, right? That our fight or flight response is kicked in. And again, it's trying to keep us safe. I think for the last couple of years, it's been a lot of black and white thinking about AI. AI is coming for our jobs.
Yeah.
AI is great. AI is terrible. Like there's not been a lot of nuanced discussion about it. And I think we are hopefully entering an age where we can actually have some more nuanced. It's all those things.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring Podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world-class tech leader. Today's guest is Lara Hogan, an author, public speaker, and coach for managers and leaders across the whole tech industry. And she's had a long career as VP of Engineering at Fly, Kickstarter, Director at Etsy, and more. So with Lara, we talked about her journey in tech, which started with a philosophy degree. And then, taking from her work as a coach, we talked more about how successful teams are adopting AI and what you can do to make engineers feel safe about it. And finally, we explored the Biceps framework and how you can better understand people's needs at work. So let's dive right into it. Welcome, Lara, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So, Lara, you're an author, a public speaker, and a coach for managers across the tech industry. And you've also had a long career as VP of Engineering at Fly, Kickstarter, Director at Etsy, and more. And I have to say, I love your blog. This is the very first thing I want to tell you. I've recommended, I think, so many articles across the years on the newsletter about feedback, 101s and stuff like that. So, and first and foremost, I want to tell you, you have to post more. But I'm happy. I'm happy that this year, I think you've been posting more. Right? I don't know if that was in your New Year's resolutions. How did it go?
It felt like I had more brain space all of a sudden again and obviously there's a lot changing in the industry right now, which means that there's a lot more things to talk about. One big one in particular that people can't seem to avoid talking about. I made a joke recently. I was at lunch with some old friends. And before we joined the lunch, I said to my partner, how many minutes do you think it'll take before we all start talking about AI? And he was like, 10. Like, we haven't seen each other in a while. They've got, we've got family stuff. Like, we'll do some catch up. No, it was 2 minutes. It was like, it's all I need. So for the blog, obviously, there's a lot of stuff to talk
there's
about.
Just, there's either AI or small talk. Basically, there's no in between.
Exactly, yes. Which is, how boring. I mean, I'm excited to talk about with you here because I think there's a lot for managers in particular to be thinking about. I mean, obviously. But frankly, in my personal life, I'm like, I'm over, like, I'm good. Let's talk about like literally anything else.
Yes.
So boring.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, on one end, for people like myself, like you, we write blogs and newsletters. So of course, this is a big source of ideas, and we can talk with people, understand what's going on. But I'm always concerned that people who read my newsletter, I mean, will they be like, oh, Luca, that's enough, please. Can you talk about something else now?
Over it. Yeah, it's funny, right? Like I avoided it for as long as I possibly could. I was doing. At Fly, we were building a product that was, hugely influenced by a lot of stuff out on the market. And so there was a lot of, in my work life, there was a lot of AI-focused things. And I still avoided writing about it because I was like, I don't want to just like hop on the bandwagon for the sake of hopping on the bandwagon. But it has come up enough for me with my dear friends, with my coaching clients, again, with the managers that I work with, that I was like, okay, fine. It's important for me to write something about it.
Hey, before we continue, I was reading the X 2026 survey on how AI is impacting developer productivity, and the results were kind of surprising. One of the main call-outs is that AI tools still lack critical context. This is how they describe it. An AI assistant can't reason over a Slack thread from an archive channel or the mental model of the engineer who built it. So now that we are all coding with agents, it's clear that the gap is not a bigger context window or adding another MCP server. Until agents have the same tribal knowledge you have, the value you get from them is still limited. And this is exactly the type of problem our sponsor today, Unblocked, is solving for tens of thousands of developers. Unblocked is the context layer for modern engineering teams. It brings together your PRs, docs, conversations, tickets, and more, turning them into actionable context for both your team and their AI agents. Engineering teams that are getting ahead right now use a context engine like Unblocked to make better plans, write higher quality code, use fewer tokens, and spend less time in review cycles. So if you're running Claude Code, Cursor, or any agentic workflow, give Unblocked a try. Get a free 3-week trial at getunblocked.com/refactoring. Yeah, I think, on one side of the spectrum, I think that there is way too much to talk about AI. On the other hand, I also think that people who have the experience and the insight, the nuance, there's a part of me that thinks they should be posting more, possibly, right? I mean, because it's true that there is so much content, but most of it, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's kind of shallow. You even doubt that. I mean, has this guy really tried something, or it's just regurgitating what they've read on other people? And instead, it feels like there is a quiet, cohort of people who are just building, and they can't be bothered at sharing and posting online. And instead, I would love them to.
Yes, so there's that part. Absolutely, there's like the shallowness or the what I'm seeing a lot of is like, here's how I do X, like here's my workflow, here's my process, and what I'm noticing is that there's not a lot of like helpful knowledge in that for people who have their own workflows or their own product area that's different, different kinds of repo, different company organizational structure. Like there's not a lot of like copy pastable. There's some, but like you said, it's kind of shallow. You're right. The nuance, the complexity. I think for the last couple of years, it's been a lot of black and white thinking about AI. AI is coming for our jobs. AI is great. AI is terrible. Like there's not been a lot of nuanced discussion about it. And I think we are hopefully entering an age where we can actually have some more nuanced. It's all those things, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it feels like so far there's been a lot of slogans, right? I mean, quick mental models like AI is a co-pilot, AI is a co-worker, AI is an amplifier, AI is this and that. But I mean, it stops at the surface, it doesn't tell you much. But yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. So please, for people who are thinking about it from a nuanced, complex perspective, please share more of that nuanced. It's not as fun to read as the slogans. Obviously, slogans are good brainworms, but like people aren't excited anymore. About the slogans, I think.
Yes, I mean, let's move to the next step. That is from the slogans to I think we can say this officially on the podcast and make it happen. Yes,
great.
Lara and Luca are saying that, so the industry will follow.
Yes. I can't wait. I'm so excited about that.
Okay, so I think you'll be happy that my first question is not about AI, because it's about. Because I scrapped it. It was about AI, actually. No,
sorry.
So it will be my second question.
Great.
No, so I mean, truth be told, I discovered recently by doing research for this interview that you actually in undergrad you didn't study computer science at all. You were actually a philosophy major, right?
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So walk me through how you went from this to, I don't know, self-taught developer, engineering director. Do you regret it? I mean,
do my parents regret it?
All things considered by now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So philosophy, it's funny, the degree, so the philosophy program that I went into, I didn't go to school for philosophy. It wasn't my intention. I actually had planned on, I went to a school in Washington, D.C., and my goal in doing that was to be an ambassador. I wanted to like get into world politics and like be an ambassador. And I literally took one semester of world politics and was like, the world is too mean, actually. I don't know. I'm good. I don't want to participate in this anymore.
Yeah, so, said no one ever in politics. Yeah.
Exactly. No, thank you. So I actually switched majors, and how I chose my major was I looked at the course requirements for the other programs, and I said, what's the minimum number of credits that I need to get a degree? And like philosophy had the fewest number of credits, which meant I could double major, which meant I could actually take a lot of other kinds of classes. So philosophy and visual media were the two like degrees, I guess, bachelor degrees that I got. Again, my school was not known for either of those things, but it was like a way to get a piece of paper by the end of it, which I was told a piece of paper is important. So the philosophy degree, I think, actually has helped me a lot in my career because they taught me how to write. I had to just like pump out 7 to 10 page papers, like 3 a week. And you get really good at developing your argument and supporting your argument and then closing your argument in like the tightest. If anybody's read any of my my books, like one of the biggest pieces of feedback I've gotten is like Lara doesn't faff about. Like it's a very succinct writing style from my philosophy degree. Just like here's the minimum number of words to deliver this argument. So that's been extremely helpful, having that writing background. And then how I got my first job was from the visual media degree. I had to take a Photoshop course, like an old. I can't even tell you the version number of the Photoshop that we were using in that. But my teacher saw that I already knew how to use Photoshop. And he worked for an email newsletter company. And he was like, come be an intern and then eventually come get hired at this email newsletter company. And that was like, CSS was like just starting to become a thing. And I had learned, did you have Neopets growing up? This might be before your time. Neopets was a website where you could take care of a tiny little digital pet, basically. And there was an HTML class. This is for children. It was how to do HTML like website, and so that's how I learned HTML as like a teenager. And then that was really helpful in my email newsletter company work.
It's amazing. It's an amazing story already.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people I've worked with in my career have that like weird sideways direction into tech, just because with the resources that have been available to us, some people are able to be self-taught and then get to and work opportunities.
And I mean, I'll stop you here because I think, I mean, as much as this story is unique in its own way, talking with people on the podcast, I actually stumbled on many people who got in tech in many weird ways and different ways I can think of. I remember speaking with charity majors, and I think Maria Gutierrez from Personio studied journalism, something like that. And I think, I mean, it makes me think about all the concern that there is today. This is not a question about AI yet, but
my brain was going there too.
It's okay. About the fact that junior engineers will not be exposed to many of these things because now AI this and that. They will not learn things the right way. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, tech has always been messy. I mean, people come to that from all walks of life, and it's not like you either graduate Stanford with honors or you're cooked. I mean, it's never worked that way. So maybe that's a little bit overblown.
Yeah, I think there are companies, right? There are organizations that prioritize that workflow, that like Stanford grad looking at somebody's degree, looking at someone's program. Like there definitely are organizations that do optimize for that. Not the organizations that I've worked for, but they do exist, but I think the organizations that I've worked for and with typically have been more open to other walks of life kind of joining the tech industry. I feel very fortunate.
But I mean, it's I think tech is so broad and opens up to so many opportunities that I mean, I don't believe that there is just one way of getting into it. I think, as you said, things that humanities gave to you were useful in many different ways, and I'm sure that we could make the same argument for different types of studies. And I think more diversity adds more things to the table and as opposed to, yes, we all graduate CS at Stanford.
I agree. Yeah. Especially from like a product design and user experience perspective. I think it's interesting to see how folks from very different backgrounds can see things that aren't taught in school, frankly. So like you wouldn't have gotten that from your degree program anyway.
Yeah. And so at some point you transitioned from doing tech work as a, let's say, an IC, even if it was not called like that at that time, maybe, to a manager, right? So how did it go?
Really badly. It was real bad. It was.
Everybody says that, actually.
It was. I think I wanted to try it because it felt like a leadership opportunity, and I kind of wanted to like grow some skills there. I hadn't really thought about the people side of it, and I was young. I didn't understand why everybody didn't want the same things or cared about the same things, or I didn't really know how to make people feel heard or seen, So and like the people that I was working with, some of them were extremely good, mature, talented communicators. Others were not. Others were like me, young, inexperienced, poor communicators. And it took me a while to figure out. It took me first. I had to spot that there was a problem. I think that sometimes we can, as humans, just like make it everybody else's problem but ours. Like it's not. I'm not the problem. It's this other person's problem. So it took me a while to recognize that maybe there was two sides to this. That maybe I was also participating in continuing to make this a tough experience. I'm talking generally not to hide it, but just to be like, it was a mess. The whole thing was a mess. And I had some good mentorship from a really strong manager who was able to say, here's how to make this person feel seen and heard. Here's how to reflect back what you are hearing from them. Here's how to communicate differently about the goal that you have. And by the way, Lara, what goal do you have? I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
I've just heard frustration. What are you actually optimizing for? Which is become one of my favorite questions.
Such a great question.
It's come up so much for me, and my partner's sick of it. Hey Ben, what are you optimizing for when you load the dishwasher? So he's over it. But I think that in other worlds, it's been useful. But really, that mentorship was what got me out of that first mentorship sticky spot.
Yeah, I love this story. And did you choose to get into management, kind of knowing what you were getting into? I mean, to some extent, but you felt like you could be good at this. I mean, working more with people as opposed to working more like with tech, or was it more like, as it is for many people, like the only way to grow maybe in your journey, in your career, the company you were in? How did it went?
Yeah. I'm an unusual case in which I had confidence, unfounded confidence, like not good confidence, but I did have confidence that I would be good at it. That poor first team of dealing with me. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I did feel like I could do a good job at it.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing a good job, and I had to learn how to do a good job.
Yeah, I love it. And you think that philosophy, being good at writing, the humanities helped again transition into that? Yeah.
Yeah, it helped me. So my philosophy courses were a lot of like applied philosophy. There was like a little bit of a logic component, but most of it was like the human experience. Latin American thought was where I spent a bunch of course time. So there was a lot of like understanding different identities and understanding the different perspectives and how we can all face the same subject or situation and have extremely different experiences of it. And that was absolutely useful.
Yeah, love this. So this is a little bit more speculation, but there is this, of course, this narrative that our hard technical skills are kind of more under risk because of AI, and maybe humanities and other types of studies might get a little bit more into fashion, let's say, because your human skills, I don't want to call them soft skills, like more like human skills are more of an edge maybe than ever before, or can be in the future. Do you see that from your vantage point, or it's still up in the air?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I do, because critical thinking is like, I think about moments in my career where I'm trying to think of an example that I can like kind of like make vague enough to share publicly, but like, an experiment that was run on a product where it looked good on paper, but actually there were all of these consequences and pitfalls that the people planning the experiment didn't foresee or didn't care about. And it takes critical thinking skills, and it takes somebody with an outside perspective to maybe see the forest for the trees. And I think that critical thinking component is, for sure, there are tools that can do parts of that work, but sometimes you just need, in my experience, an outsider who is not familiar with the context, who is not familiar with the way that things have always been done, et cetera, best practices even, to be able to see something different about an experiment that you're running, a product that you're developing, how teams should be working together, dependencies, how goal setting works, how deadlines work, how performance reviews are driven, assessed. Like there's just so many different places in our like day-to-day work life where critical thinking skills are critical, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities and connections that are, are hard to explain on a in a practical level, but you feel them. I've done kind of the opposite journey, because from being in tech all my life, now I basically run the newsletter, the podcast, and so I write, right? And there is a surprising kind of similarity when you talked about critical thinking and structuring your thoughts and creating a long piece of writing. I mean, you've written books, you understand it completely, I think, to creating like piece of software meant as something that is complex, that is structured, has to have like internal consistency. So I get what you mean. I hope people who are listening get it too. But I really think there are more similar things under the surface that we usually account for.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So back to your writing and to AI also, this time for real. I mean, we resisted how long? Like 20 minutes? Better than your 2 minutes.
Hey, we did it. We did
it. I mean, almost half of the episode. I told you I love your blog, and one of the articles that I loved more recently was when you wrote about the AI aha meetings, and so how you spoke with many teams and leaders about how they're adopting AI, especially as a team, not just as like individuals. You told stories and you made this proposal about these aha meetings that we'll get to. But from the people you have spoken to, what do you think are the traits, the practices, or the skills, I don't know, that separate teams who are thriving, happy about these, they're experimenting, they're on it, versus those who are more struggling?
Oh, what a great question. One of the things that was consistent, so I talked to a bunch of staff engineers, staff plus, so principal distinguished engineers. And I basically was interviewing them because I knew, I've been in this world for a long time. I have very dear friends who have also been in it for a long time. And so I talked to people who I trust, who I've known for a long time, about how they're adopting it and how they're thinking about it. And it was really a wide spectrum of folks, some that were maybe 3 to 4 months digging into it and trying with it, and some who are much further along in their adoption and integration process. One of the themes that was consistent across people who felt more confident was really clear expectations from leadership, where it wasn't this like impending hammer of doom. It wasn't like, we're not mandating it yet.
Yet.
But like, wink, wink.
It's gonna happen soon if you don't do something about it.
Right. And on the flip side, the folks who were struggling with it more were where it was more vague. It was more vague where it was like, we're counting how many tokens that you're using. What a vague, like, think about the threat, but also the lack of clarity. It's clearly encouraged. What am I being assessed on? What am I being graded on? Is this going to be part of my performance? Am I going to get laid off because where's everybody else? Am I being stack ranked? Right? That like that basically not understanding what leadership is thinking or how they're thinking about, but just this awful kind of arbitrary.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking back to days in my past where we think about how many lines of code people have added or how many comments on PRs, like what an arbitrary measure. But this threat, this very vague threat in the air. So folks who were struggling had more of leadership that was like not really talking candidly, openly, and like concretely about how they were thinking about it. The folks who were feeling much more at ease were a lot more proficient in this, I think, because they didn't have this like looming threat above them.
Yeah, and I love this take. And do you think so? I wouldn't say play the devil's advocate, but let's also try to take the other side of the argument. So I also try sometimes to be empathetic with founders or CEOs that try to push these mandates, because I think they're concerned. And I think when you speak with some engineers, you can understand why. That there are people who are biased or they don't want to use these because they want to kind of protect their craft and I mean make decisions that they're not optimizing, to use your words, they're not optimizing for what's best for the product, for the business, for the team, but they're optimizing for their own comfort and set of skills. So do you think there is like a good balanced way of creating some more directive way of pushing for this adoption that doesn't go too far?
Yeah. So I would say in the camp of the folks that I talked to who were really proficient and really comfortable with it, there was a split. There were mandates for some of them. And in one of the organizations, they had been integrating every single part of the tool chain for a couple of years, which means that talks about how early stage some of these tools were. And the mandate was extremely clear from above about how people were expected to be using these tools and required to use these tools. So I think there is value in the clarity that leadership team brought to it. But then coming back to our first point about nuance, some of the other engineers who still felt very comfortable, their leadership team actually had a very nuanced take, but was still very clear. We are not mandating it today. We might mandate it soon, right? That in and of itself creates predictability. It creates like, okay, they talk about how we understand you want to have choice, you want to have autonomy, and how you are thinking about using these tools. You might, people value the craft of this. They actually articulated all of these things that people have been worrying about or just like back of their brain maybe feeling. And so that clarity, again, created a lot more trust and created a lot more like chilled out feelings for the people that I was talking to, where they're like, okay, I understand. And also those leaders talk about the why. I think a lot of leaders don't talk about why in like real terms, meaning a lot of people are like, this is the future. Let's go back to the slogans. This will make us faster. That's not true. Well, it's much more nuanced than that, right? It's not that it's not true. It's that it might make you faster in doing certain kinds of tasks. What kind of tasks? Let's talk about it. Let's run experiments to see where it's. Let's get feedback from people and providing clarity around that as like a leadership team, I think is critical in making people actually try stuff, do stuff, and like not just be terrified every single day that they're about to lose their jobs.
So what makes for a good mandate versus a bad mandate? The good mandate, you said it's about setting the principles, maybe some broad categories of tasks, but maybe not getting into, you said before, bad metrics and token maxing and
exactly. Yes, exactly. I think also making sure that the suite of tools, the developer tools, are actually like useful. I've seen some organizations develop like a small cohort of people, like a team whose job it is to develop the principles, develop, here's the tool set, here's examples and repos of how we're doing this. It sounds like that's slow. I don't think that's bad. Like, as in, I see that being a frustration point for people. I've talked to people who are like, oh, they're taking forever because there's security implications. It makes sense that it's taking forever. But I think it also makes sense that those people should be getting feedback from teams who are adopting these tools, experimenting with these tools. There should be a feedback loop. So making sure it's clear who's setting the pace, who's creating this, how everything's connected, who's creating the patterns. I hate the word accountability, but I think I have to use it here. There needs to be some accountability in, like, I'm sure you've received the PRs that were clearly written, like the PRs were written by and the code was changed by an AI tool.
Yes, I do.
And you're like, I'm supposed to use my time and energy to read something that a computer wrote, right? And in response, people are not doing that. People are using their own tools to read, which is fine. I think if that's the expectation that leadership is setting, that's okay. But when there's not clarity, when it's not clear, hey, you should be writing your own PRs. The tool may have changed the code, but you should write your own PRs, or you can use these tools to write the PRs, to read the PRs, to approve the PRs, to write the. I think there needs to be that level of guidelines, frankly, for people.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that makes it hard is that, I mean, of course, nobody knows what should be the boundary, between things that you can more or less delegate or automate and things instead stay like human domain. And so I think, I mean, I maintain a kind of a small open source tool, and I receive this automated PRs from many people who do that in completely good faith in many cases, right? And they don't realize that then, either I, get back, fire with fire with AI reviews on this, or of course it feels like not symmetric that I have to review things manually. So I think it's so hard to set, the right expectations where nothing that you do feels rude to another person. And then you may also make the case for why should that feel rude, right? I mean, that's really, I think it depends on individual people and how they receive this. It's messy.
Totally. Again, I spoke with staff plus engineers, right? And these are people who are used to doing a lot of glue work, doing a lot of people stuff. And they mostly, not entirely, but mostly were really offended when because
how dare you?
because their job has been trying to keep all this stuff together and moving. And now now I have to spend my precious time where I could be finally getting back to coding or whatever, or using these tools myself. And now I have to play cleanup again. It's a lot of janitorial work for these folks. So that's where the imbalance, and that's where that feeling of rudeness can come from. I will say every single one of the people that I spoke with writes their own PRs. There was something like opinionated. There was something like values-based for them, which I wish I had dug into a little bit more, but it was interesting to me that the theme with all these people were like, I'm not going to do that to another person. It's important to me to make sure that whoever's on the receiving end of this, I want them as a human to read it, so I'm going to write it with my human brain.
Yeah, I think it's fitting that PRs are being this kind of surface of problems, because I mean they've always been, if you ask me, it's the prime territory of this kind of sneaky conflicts or all kinds of vicious stuff that happens in the team, and so I don't find it particularly surprising that AI is not really helping with that.
I think that's right. I think it's interesting, right? Like, instead of asking what should the computers be doing, I think asking what should the humans be doing is maybe an easier, not easier. Maybe it'll give us a fresh perspective on how we should be approaching this.
Do you think, I mean, having talked about PRs and taking for granted that we are shipping more code anyway, I mean, we are coding more, and so we are creating more PRs and more surface for reviews. Do you have an opinion about how to keep the playground level and not to drown in PRs? Do you think, of course, maybe there is some element of using more AI in PRs? I mean, do you see some teams that have been successful in making PRs less terribles in this environment?
Definitely. So one of the common frustrations I heard was this person clearly didn't test this. Meaning this person didn't do the extra step of diligence. The tool wrote some code, the tool made a PR, or maybe they wrote the PR, right? Like, either way, they handed over this thing that hadn't been additionally thought through. They hadn't thought through edge cases. They actually didn't look in the rest of the code to see if there were other patterns to repurpose. It just didn't work. Like, when I hear frustrations, it's about that. It's about taking the extra step to make sure that whatever you're handing over is functional, is sensible. Not whether or not it just works or not. I mean, that too, but like, does this make sense? I don't know if that's how you feel about the open source PRs that you're receiving, but that's definitely a thing I've heard a lot of. So there's something for me about setting expectation that when an engineer writes code to be reviewed or sends out code to be reviewed, that they actually have taken the time, with the tool or not, to make sure it's functional.
Yes.
They've actually asked the tool, hey, are there other patterns that exist that's elsewhere that could be repurposed? Did I just reinvent the wheel? Did the tool just reinvent the wheel? Those kinds of extra, it's not even QA, right? It's just like, does this make sense?
Yes. Yes. I think a lot of this goes back to, you said, setting clear expectations and creating clear workflows about how things should be done with this respect. And these are not like static in time. Of course, it's a moving target. And speaking of that, one of the things that I loved about your article is how you advocate for sharing. You tell me if I'm right on this, if I got it right, of sharing not just your wins or stuff that works about AI, but just learnings and things that are surprising, even bad surprising things. Even if it's a failure, if it's learning, it's good.
Yes.
Is that right?
So the context, that's exactly right. So the context of the article that I wrote was basically about how I'm proposing, but again, based these conversations I've been having, I'm proposing that teams have a weekly sync, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is.
Yeah.
In which everybody shares something that they learned. Again, it could be a mistake that they made that they learned from. It could be how something works that they were surprised by. It could be something that works really well, and so they were surprised about how this tool did that thing.
Yeah.
It could be anything. The idea is that everybody shares. From a psychological safety perspective, it's actually important that everybody shares, because otherwise you start to have an imbalance. People who are either gatekeeping information, or managers feel like they can get out of it. So that power imbalance, it's just a mess. It's important that everybody shares. And when I think about times when I've learned the most, I think about postmortems and how much sitting in postmortems has taught me about how our system works, just how things were connected. But not just that, right? Asking questions like, how did you know that that was the dashboard to look at? Gives me so much more information about, like, oh, this very experienced person who is very familiar with this part of our system, I didn't even know that that dashboard existed. Or they've seen this pattern before, and now I can, in my brain, remember that pattern to look for. That's learning. That's incredibly important for us as humans, as engineers. And so for me, bringing that to the AI context, where there's like a huge discrepancy between how fast people are able to experiment with and learn how to use these tools effectively. And everything's changing so fast. What somebody has realized and recognized today may not even be a thing the next week.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the very last thing you said. I speak with many people who may have formed some kind of a strong opinion about something, and it was like from 2 months ago, and that opinion is already outdated. And so I think that setting this kind of recurring, very tight feedback loop about these things, it's so important not to have people not get stuck into this kind of old intuitions.
Totally. Yeah. And again, that psychological safety piece, right? Like, if we're all learning and making mistakes and sharing those learnings, again, I'm not saying this is the easiest thing in the world to set up. I spoke with one person on Blue Sky who was like, I tried, people weren't into the whole everybody shares thing. And I was like, oof, you got a long road ahead. Like, I'm curious to know why. Like, what was their hesitation? What was their reticence about? I think that is going to inform the culture of the team a lot. But I've talked to other engineers who were like, hey, I did this. I learned so much from, and again, staff engineers who learned so much from everybody, not just the more senior, more experienced people, but the people who are fresher to this, from their manager. Like, everybody's learning. And so the ability to like actually share all this stuff, like you said, it's changing so fast. It's just, I think it's going to be a critical part of how we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm sure that to get everyone sharing, if I think of many engineers I know, there's going to be prep work needed. But maybe you can get there in baby steps. Maybe, you start with champions, people who are more optimistic about things, or even maybe the other end of the spectrum, even the skeptics that can demo, see how this thing fails. It's great too.
It's good to model it. It's good to model that, like, humility, frankly, about learning how things you didn't know that thing before, or how you accidentally took the site down with this thing that you did. Like, again, that's why postmortems have been so valuable for us as an industry and for many other industries. And I think the same is true, but I think making it a weekly team sync meeting can keep it hopefully a little bit more lightweight. I think about when I used to do these, not in an AI context, but when I was doing these, I was the director of like a product infrastructure suite of teams, like, 30 people, all working on kind of different performance, accessibility, design patterns, and we learned so much about what projects were coming down the pipeline from other teams just by hearing what different people were learning and demoing in those meetings. And like, oh, I'm learning so much context that I wouldn't have had before just because people are sharing.
Yeah, and you mentioned postmortems before, which I think it's a good example of things where we learn a lot from failures. I mean, not always failures, but it's kind of what it is. And so, if you don't also cover that part of the story of the spectrum, you miss like 50% plus of the learning. Yeah.
Yes, and like I get it. There are some organizational cultures where that's not safe. That doesn't feel safe. So I think if folks are in a position of power, soft power, hard power, whatever it is, like use that power for good to model making mistakes. Because if you feel safe in your job, which I get it, not many people do right now, but if you feel that kind of influence ability, I think being able to model that, sharing your mistakes, is going to be extremely valuable for everybody else.
Yeah, and just makes me think how a lot of these things that we have talked about so far, like these meetings, sharing about your experience, but even PRs before, how much of this stuff you can read online about, but then it may or may not work for you based on your culture, how your team works, and needs of your people. And I've been thinking about you many years before you wrote about this framework called Biceps. About understanding people current needs at work. And so in doing some prep for this interview, I've been thinking, how would Lara think about Biceps in this point in time and how things are changing? So first of all, for people who don't know it, can you briefly walk me through it? Yeah.
Absolutely. So Biceps is an acronym coined by this amazing coach and trainer. Her name is Paloma Medina. And it's based in studies about workforce, neurology, sociology. Like, it's all very research-backed and science-backed. Folks who might be familiar with the SCARF model by David Rock are familiar with most of this. But for some reason, Rock decided to not include one of the letters. So Biceps is Paloma's. I prefer it. It's also open source, so people can use it in whatever context it's like. So again, this is all based on like actual science stuff. What do humans need at work, basically, to feel safe and secure? Just to kind of contextualize this, when we are not feeling safe or secure, our amygdala, that fight or flight response or freeze response in our brain, that's what gets activated. And it's, anxiety, or you might feel like leaving and finding a job. You might feel, our safety is threatened. Our amygdala is activated by more than just direct threats to our physical safety. So these are the Biceps represents the things that might be activated in the workplace. The B stands for belonging, right? Community. We all need to feel a sense of we belong, we're part of this tribe, like we feel some safety and security in being a part of a group. Improvement and progress. So we want things to feel like they're moving forward. We are moving forward. Our work is moving forward. The company is moving forward. We want to feel like things are not just stagnant or we're taking steps backwards. The C stands for choice, right?
Yeah.
Tom, you've already talked about this in the interview. We want to have some amount of control and choice over our work experience, about how we choose to do things. Too much choice and things will also feel a little bit sticky, and too little choice. We have like a healthy amount of choice that we need to feel safe and secure. Equality and fairness. So we need to feel like we're being treated fairly. We have equal access to opportunities and to data, to information. The P stands for predictability. We want to know what's happening. We want to have a sense of what's going to happen in the future. And again, not too much. Too much predictability also feels stagnant. But too little predictability is often when I'm talking to people about their start of life. It's just a lot of churn, a lot of uncertainty. And then significance is the last one. And this one tends to be judged. So it's like status. People, I've noticed culturally, especially in America, people kind of judge, like, that person's gunning for promotion or for a title. And while I understand that instinct to kind of judge that feeling, this is the one that people, I think, again, your amygdala is trying to make sure that you're staying safe. And to stay safe, some of us need to feel like we are being recognized appropriately for the work that we're doing, et cetera. So that's Biceps in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love this. And do you think that I mean, these areas might be the same for everyone, but the strength to which we respond to some of these specifically may depend on like individuals. I mean, there are people who maybe feel a stronger need for belonging or for predictability. It's more important for them. So do we all fall on a spectrum on this?
Yeah. The first time I wrote about this, I wrote about it in the context of desk moves, which like feels so archaic now because we are co-located like in the same office anymore. But when I first wrote about this, I had just organized a shuffling of desks. Basically, we needed to like move some people around. And the reactions I got from people, some of whom were like, yeah, whatever. But a lot of whom had very different responses. And I could kind of start to track it back to Biceps. So I wrote about it. So people responded like freaked out because they were no longer part of the team that they were part of anymore. They didn't feel as close to that, again, belonging.
Yeah.
They didn't get choice over where their desk was. Their desk used to be close to the CEO, and that gave them a sense of status and significance. They wouldn't have that anymore. So the same thing that happens, the same event that happens, the same stimulus can trigger different letters, for lack of a better analogy, and different people. Even though people are still, everybody's freaked out, and it's because of this thing, the reasons why can be really different.
Yeah, and I mean, this just makes me think about one of my personal most common like failure modes as a manager when I was growing it. I try to apply like find patterns and structured thinking, and so I can remember myself as like first time CTO and manager trying to find like playbooks about how to work with people and like finding success with something and thinking, okay, from now on, this is how I need to work with everybody, right? And instead, the playbook that wins with one person doesn't win with another person. Maybe fails completely. How annoying! Yeah. I mean, yes. Fortunately, now there is AI, and so I don't have to work with people anymore.
You don't even need managers anymore, I hear.
No, but yes, I mean, and I think, I mean, as humans, we're just wired to try to, pattern match. And when you find something that works, you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. And instead, it's more complex than that.
Totally. Couldn't say it better. Yeah.
And do you think that, I mean, this kind of rhetorical question, with everything going on with AI, I guess there are many of these areas that are threatening now for people. I mean, just top of my mind, I can think of significance. I mean, engineers thinking about the value of their work or downright worrying about being replaced. Or you mentioned predictability, of course, and even choice. Like maybe we are being forced to use things that we don't want to use. I mean, are you seeing that?
Absolutely. Even in my own household, like it's everywhere. I think it's interesting, right? When I hear people expressing frustration, it's not coming from a place of curiosity, and that is what tells me the amygdala is in play, right? That our fight or flight response is kicked in, and again, it's trying to keep us safe. But we are required to get our amygdalas to chill out and bring our prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of our brain, back online in order to try to move forward, in order to try to make sense of this, rationalize, think about next steps. But if our amygdala is alert and it's awake, it's in control. So we have to figure out which of those biceps core needs is what's going on for us. So, I talked with one engineer who was like, I haven't gotten a straight answer from my leadership about why they're pushing this.
Yeah.
It's not that they're avoiding the question. They're trying to answer it, but I think even my leaders don't know why they're pushing it. It feels like it's important. It feels like it's urgent. It feels like they want everybody to do it. Like that messaging is very clear, but like why? And that lack of knowing why has really gotten under this person's skin.
Yeah.
like amygdala, just
getting mad, like inside out. Yes.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And that blocks this person from being able to make progress on this. Again, because our amygdala is trying to keep them safe. Why won't they say why?
Yes.
Why can't they give a clear answer about why this is happening, what they're trying to get at, what they're looking for token usage? Why? Like, what's the end goal of this? And I'm not saying leaders should be alert to this necessarily specifically. I think they should be alert to a lot of things. But this is what's going on if you're a leader in your organization's brains. Again, that's a predictability one. That's also an improvement progress one. If I don't know why, I don't know what I'm working towards. If I don't know why and the actual core end of the road why, I feel stagnant. I feel like I can't make progress because this is all just wasted effort if I don't understand the goal, the concrete goal that you're looking for.
Yeah. You said something at the beginning of this when you said we can sense when something doesn't come from a place of curiosity. And I love that. And so where does it come from? If it's not a place, what's the bad place that it comes from?
I'm going to try to not say it's bad. I think it's just human.
Yeah.
It's the amygdala, right? When we aren't coming from a place of curiosity, we're coming from a place of
judgment,
looking for safety. But protection, right? Trying to keep ourselves safe. And like there's 5 common forms of resistance that kind of signal to us that our amygdalas are active. Devil's advocate. When you see someone playing devil's advocate, their amygdala is active. They're, by and large, they're not just trying to be a jerk. They're trying to keep themselves safe by like throwing out all sorts of different arguments to like keep space between themselves and the situation. Fighting, looking for escape route, avoidance behavior, and then the one that I do the most, again, we all do these things, but the one that I do the most is called bonding, where I look to other people with kind of the same perspective to like verbally process with them. So when we sense one of these 5 things in other humans, we can get some clues, some data that their amygdala is active. And that is what this is all coming from. Again, it's not safety. And from safety comes curiosity. It's from, I feel threatened, or my brain feels threatened by this. And so I need to like find a way to feel better about this.
Yeah. Do you also get, I mean, we've always talked about from the perspective of a manager needing to get better at this and handle this. Do you also get better from the other side of the table as an individual, understanding better yourself? I mean, what triggers you the most, and how can you get better even at this? If can you think about maybe past experiences and
I actually give a workshop on this. It's my feedback workshop. My feedback workshop is about, again, why humans react so surprisingly, sometimes really awfully, to receiving feedback. Why we are so hesitant to give feedback. And also how to notice in your own body if you are having this fight or flight response, how to notice when your amygdala is active. And part of the homework I give is basically write down, hey, notice in your personal life or in your work life, when do you start to feel this? What do you notice in your body? Like one of my coaching clients used to go ice cold when her amygdala was activated. And so she would start to clock when she was reaching for her scarf on the side of her desk. She was like, aha, my amygdala is feeling a little threatened. Like this is my clue. And again, everybody's different. So starting to notice in your personal life again, or your work life, when you are starting to feel these emotions can give you some clues, write it down, give you some clues about what kinds of situations or maybe which biceps core need is most often threatened for you.
Yeah. And let's say instead you're a manager who's listening to this and they've never worked on trying to figure out better how to to make things safer for individuals on their teams and for the team as a whole. What would be the first step that you suggest to get things started?
This is going to sound so stupid. So like,
I don't think so.
Brace yourself. It's so stupid because it's going to sound trite, and like it can land as trite. It can land as cheesy. So you have to like mean it, but literally just reflecting back what this person's saying. Literally just being like, okay, got it. What it sounds like, and then repeat back what they're saying. Literally, that's what most humans want. Yeah. They just want to make sure that what they're saying is landing. You may not agree with it. You're not saying like, hey, you're right, that guy sucks. You're saying, okay, it sounds like that person is the person that's creating, like it for you is creating this suite of emotions or this situation, or that's what's really getting under your skin right now.
Yeah.
And just the act of reflecting that back does so much work to telling that their amygdala, this is safer.
Yeah.
You're being heard, you're being seen. This threat is not going unacknowledged. it's when you start to see the same emotions from people over and over and over again, that's your biggest clue that like, they don't feel heard or seen. You're just like blown past whatever their concern is. And you've got to acknowledge that concern, not agree with it, but acknowledge it before they can start to move past it.
Yeah. I love this. I think it's not tried at all. And I think it's something that we don't, it would be if we could say in honesty that we do this all the time. I don't think we do this. So one another, yes. And do you think there is also something on the other side that individuals can do to get them engineers, to get them understood better and pass the message across about what feels threatening to them?
Absolutely. This is tricky because, again, it's all going to be context-based.
Of course.
Like people will respond differently to you saying the same exact words that I would say, right? So it's going to be relational. It's going to be context-specific. But finding a way, if your amygdala is able to chill out for a second and your prefrontal cortex is online, understanding what this other person, your manager, the leader, whoever it is, what they care about, and reframing your concern with their language or what they. So let's say I care about performance and you care about accessibility. These things are not at odds, right? But sometimes they can feel like, but my thing, but your thing, right? If my amygdala is active, I'm going to be like, but performance, but page load time, but, and you're going to be like, but, not everybody's able to access this, If one of us can chill out, if our amygdalas can chill out,
yes,
and a prefrontal cortex, if let's say it's me, I would be like, okay, how can I reframe? I would like us to devote time at the end to making sure that everybody can access this.
Yes,
and everybody meaning people with visual needs, also people on older infrastructure with maybe it doesn't load as fast, but basically using language that the other person cares about, not just your own, not just the thing that you care about. It's a much shorter road to get them to care about a thing they already care about than trying to convince them that your thing is important.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's like the dual version of what you said about managers. I mean, at the end of the day, for both sides, it's about getting a better understanding of what matters for the other person, and you try to mirror that and to explain that with you said it with your own words. And in the case of a manager, you can really literally repeat things back, and as an engineer, you should think, I mean, what are really the concerns of this other person, and how can I frame my own concerns into as those concerns.
Absolutely. Paloma Medina, who created the Biceps acronym, she has this great workshop about influence, and it covers exactly this. And it's all science-backed. It's all neuroscience and sociology-backed. It's literally this. How do we influence others? We influence by understanding what they care about.
Yeah. I think it's great. And also I think it's a great closing note for these times. So thank you so much, Lara, for being with us and for this interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.